All right. So glad to be here with my friends, Beverly and Bob from Brainshark. While we let people jump into the session, why don't we kick things off with a really quick, fun icebreaker? I can't believe it's fall already. Can you?
Come so quick.
Beverly, let's start with you. Would you rather rake the leaves or jump in the leaves?
Totally jump in the leaves.
Bob, what about you?
When I was a kid, I used to have to rake the leaves on my own lawn, and then the relatives' lawn, and the neighbor's lawn. So I'm a jump into the leaves person, not a rake the leaves anymore person.
I love it. I love it. Just
How
like
about you, Melissa? What would you do?
absolutely jump in the leaves all day, every day. We have a lot of leaves to rake here in Eastern Canada, especially on my property.
I think it would be hard to find somebody who enjoys raking the leaves. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I agree. I've passed off the task to my 14-year-old, which is
There
great.
you go. He's gonna hate it as much as I did.
Yes. All right. Well, with that, since we're all jumpers, let's jump into this session, shall we?
Yep.
Today's event is Enablement and the Flywheel, and it's hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20K and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not know about. We do that through great live sessions like this one, like you're experiencing today, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, in-person events. Hooray! Those of you who aren't members, you'll be invited to join afterwards, and we sure hope that you'll join us. If you do like the content today, you'll love our Revenue Excellence Summit that's happening October 12th, 14th, where we'll talk about the people, processes, and technology needed to help you get ready for 2022. I can't believe we're there already. But enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Brainshark. So now I'm going to hand it over to Beverly to say a few words about Brainshark.
So when you asked the question about jumping in the leaves, what I think is funny is, we are sales enablement people in a sales enablement platform company. So, we're right in the leaves with everybody else. So Brainshark is a sales enablement platform. And what we do is we allow you to create learning paths, for your customer facing reps. And then we provide you a safe environment so your reps can practice the message. So, we're assuring that your reps are having effective conversations with your customers. And then lastly, in sales enablement, we're always trying to show that correlation between training and performance. And we provide you the scorecard so you can track how effective your reps are. So we're really excited to be with all of you today. Thanks for having us.
That's amazing. I'm excited to learn more from you today. So before we jump in, thank you, Beverly and Brainshark. Today, we're talking about enablement and the flywheel. We've got great experts in the field here to talk us through this content. I will be moderating today. I'm Melissa Stewart, Sales Enablement Training Manager at IntroHive. Very happy to be here and helping out MSP. And I'm really glad to be supported by this crew we have here today. So Beverly and Bob, before we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us what you love most about being in enablement. Bob, you.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. I'm Bob Bristol. I'm Manager of Sales Enablement at Brainshark, working for Beverly. My history is sales. I've been direct sales. I've built sales teams. I've been strategic account manager. So I've got a lot of direct sales and sales management background, but I moved into sales enablement, I'm going to say probably 8-10 years ago. and I've built sales enablement teams, and I love being able to bring the direct sales experience to the sales enablement group, right? It gives you a different perspective, and it really complements the training side of things, because I was a salesperson, so I know what worked for me, and I know what it meant to my team. So those are some of the things I like about sales enablement, and I think I can bring to the sales enablement role.
That's a definite edge. Let me just say that. All right, Beverly, over to you.
I have a similar background to Bob. I also had numerous sales positions and then moved into sales enablement about 5 years ago. And I would say, the one area I love about this job is just, keeping that investigative hat on and trying to understand, how we can help our sales reps be more efficient and minimize the friction and help them in moving their deals forward.
There's nothing quite like solving a challenge, is there?
Nope.
And there are many challenges out there, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you, folks. Before we jump in, a housekeeping item here. We're really excited to dive in, but first, let's go over some notes. This event will be recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A button, and we'll be sure to get them during the event near the end, or ask them throughout. We may be able to sprinkle them in as well. So today, we're going to be covering enablement and the flywheel and taking a deep dive into the following, what you're seeing on your screen here: enablement and dynamic improvement, feedback loops and communication, developing backlog items, rollout, super important, and integration across the organization that fuel that flywheel. Barriers that prevent your flywheel from actually flying, and how to address rapid transitions, scaling, and org teams throughout enablement. Before we jump in, I would like to define flywheel, just in case there are people who are not quite familiar with it. The funnel is the traditional model focused on a linear growth and can show the effectiveness of different processes within your company. But this model doesn't show the impact each process has on one another, and doesn't really acknowledge the role of the customer, the ever important customer. The flywheel model can mean different things to different organizations, but the main focus is on keeping a customer mindset throughout and beyond the sales cycle for retention and referrals. Customer referrals and word of mouth have become essential to the purchasing and retention process. And the flywheel makes sure that your company is aligned at every level in order to be customer-centric, recognizing that each action your team takes impacts another one. So for today's discussion, we'll be looking at the evolution from that funnel to the flywheel and how enablement should be a key feature in that evolution. So with that, let's start our conversation. I'm going to start with you, Beverly. What is the impact that enablement can have on this flywheel?
Thanks for the question, Melissa. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about enablement and dynamic improvement. I'm going to have Bob talk about maybe the feedback loop and communications. So when I think about the flywheel, to the point of the last slide, it really focuses more on the customer life cycle and what can we be doing throughout the organization to enhance that customer experience. And, different than the flywheel, as Melissa showed, it tends to be more of a, a cyclical process, right? And everyone in the company needs to be thinking of that mindset. And if you think of that circle that Melissa showed, oftentimes when they talk about that, the words that I hear described are attract, engage, and delight. So, from an enablement standpoint, what can I be doing to attract customers? And once that customer has expressed interest in our solution, what can I be doing to engage them throughout the buying cycle so that I'm more closely aligned with their expectations. And lastly, how do we continue to delight them throughout their entire journey so that they're more likely to renew and to refer? So to me, and Melissa, you're in a sales enablement role. When I thought about the flywheel, those of us in sales enablement have sort of had that flywheel hat on before the term was coined. It's our job to build effective processes and to make sure that our reps are aligned with their customers. So to get more momentum out of the flywheel, what you're going to hear people talking about is you either have to add more force, right? We got to get that flywheel to move faster, or we have to create less friction. And again, I think that's something that we're constantly doing daily, in our enablement roles. So if you think about adding more force, to me, it's really about, what can we be doing to add more qualified customers? And from an enablement perspective, I'm just going to talk very briefly about prospecting and those early stages of discovery. So, one of the things that's pretty basic, but we sometimes get out of the habit of doing is, are we ensuring that our sales teams are prepping? Are they doing their pre-work? Are they researching their account? Do they understand the customer's current situation? So then when they get on that customer call, which is right the next step after prepping, are they asking the right questions? Do we, within enablement, are we helping them to provide the right discovery questions so that they can uncover that opportunity? And are we providing similar use cases so that when they're having these conversations, they're really being viewed as a thought leader? And for me, it doesn't stop at discovery, right? Because, that discovery call is the first call of the sales stages. And what can we be thinking about to create, higher conversion rates as the buyer is going through the process, and to make sure that buyer's having a good experience. So that's what I think about when I think about the force piece. When I think about the friction piece, to me, it's like a mindset. If you want to build a great company, your customer experience has to be lighter than your competitors, right? It has to be 10 times better than theirs.
Love that.
And so, I sort of put on that hat and I think about, as the buyer is going through all of the sales stages, where have we internally created some friction? And, a perfect example of this is recently, if you were a Brainshark customer and you came to us asking us for a customer referral, we had this process in place with numerous stages, and it probably took us upwards of 4 to 5 days until we confirmed that referral. And, if I was a customer, I would think to myself, are they having problems finding a customer referral? Like it seems to be a disconnect. But, there was just too much process in our system. So we took that step back. We tried to eliminate that friction. And now we have this process that within 24 hours, we're able to provide that referral. So that's what I think about when I think about, that the force and friction piece. When I think about dynamic improvements, and this isn't new to any of us here on the phone, we have to be dynamic in our roles, because we all know, you start the quarter going this way and you can be on a totally different path, at the end of the quarter. And to that, I would say, we just have to define metrics to measure, how we want to see how our flywheel is working, right? We want to make sure we have a pulse on those metrics and we can quickly identify when that flywheel is losing momentum. And again, an example I think we could use is, in our sales roles, right? Everybody has to prospect. And we want to make sure that our reps have a strong pipeline. And, what are we doing when we're identifying reps that are struggling in that area. How can I be dynamic so that I'm putting in a plan B that's allowing those reps to better leverage sales navigator or discovery questions or best practices amongst my peers, so that when they do need, when they need to uptick their prospecting activity, we're doing it sooner than later. I said a lot, so I'm going to take a pause, and Bob, I'm going to let you sort of take over on, the rest of it.
Yep, sure. All good points, Bev. What I want to do is kind of describe when I look at the flywheel, right? When I look at it, I tend to look at similar to how major consumer brands view customers, right? And what lessons can I learn from them? Okay. And one of the things that they do is they look at the lifetime value of a client, right? It's not that initial deal. It's not the sale for 10K or 100K or 500K. It's that lifetime value. They've got that mentality. And if managed properly, the lifetime value is, I don't know, 10x the initial sale, 20x the initial sale. To put it in perspective, you look at Amazon, right? They don't view you as the consumer who bought vitamins from them for 39 bucks. They want the lifetime value of you. So it's more vitamins. It's a NutriBullet to make smoothies. They want to provide you the workout equipment so you can stay toned. And then you need a new TV to watch the workout videos, and on and on. That's a consumer flywheel, right? And it's driven by things you or people like you care about. In the tech world, you can think about people like Salesforce.com or Apple, and it starts with one product, then it's upgrades, then it's complementary products, then there's the services that take the customer into account to make them more successful. That's a flywheel, and that's the mentality that you have to have. And that mentality usually starts at the top. And I think when it starts at the top, the communication is key, right? The flywheel, it has to be communicated as a corporate strategy, message from the top down, with specific goals and measurements. This could be, I don't know, churn rates, recurring revenue rates, customer satisfaction, other metrics that can be identified and managed to, with progress and wins communicated across the entire organization, right? Everybody plays a role in the flywheel. And it should be, we should measure the success of the flywheel against those different organizations. And again, they can be KPIs that an organization drives to. They're measured on a monthly basis at a leadership level, so everybody kind of understands. When we start to talk about enablement, dynamic improvement, and relevant rep conversations, you have to ask yourself also, have the reps been educated on not just their own solutions, but what's going on in the industry and the market? Do they have the data and the examples that they can provide value to the prospect or client throughout that life cycle, right? You mentioned that they become the objective consultant. In order to do that, you need to know more than just about your own platform. You need to know what's going on in the market. And how is this information provided to the reps so that it's digestible and actionable, right? That's the role of the sales enablement team, taking the information and ensuring that it's digestible and actionable. So each time you do this, and each time you roll something out like that, it becomes crisper for the team, and they become much more of that objective consultant that you referred to. So those are some of the things that I think about when I think about the flywheel and the enablement and improvement of things.
I love that, Bob. And I'm just now realizing that I myself have been caught up in the Amazon flywheel.
we all are, right? And it's sometimes we try to introduce new terms and things like that, but just putting them in perspective and using those everyday examples, right? Amazon's a flywheel, and it's a really successful one, right?
You're right, it is.
You can go across a lot of different, consumer brands and understand and see that flywheel working.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love your point about promoting the success of the initiative too, because that just adds to that flywheel, right? It just keeps it going. Yeah.
Yep. Everybody wants to understand and be part of the success. So continuing to communicate those wins is critical.
Absolutely. Excellent. Okay. Well, how about we move to our next question? How does the flywheel model impact your priorities? Beverly, what about backlog items, rollout, and integration across the organization that fuel that flywheel? How does that impact your priorities?
So I would say, right, looks like there's about 30 of us here on this call, and I'm sure all of us have this long wish list of things that we want to get done, right? That's inevitable in the roles that we're in. So I think that, to me, when I think about that backlog, what I would do is I'd evaluate the impact that, all of those things that I have on the backlog, how would that impact, the three terms that I talked about earlier: attract, engage, and delighting your customers. And so when you look at your list, I think what you need to do is you need to get all of your stakeholders together, and you need to determine, what's the criteria that we're going to be using to prioritize what's on that backlog list. And then it's critical that you get consensus from all of them on the ROI that you want to use. And depending upon where we are, in our company stages, it could be many things that you could measure. So you might measure new business, you might measure upsell opportunities, retention rates, customer satisfaction. I think that you need to decide what it is you're measuring, and then when you look at your list, it's just going to eventually, those that are most important to you are going to sort of rise to the top and allow you then to determine, the ranking of that backlog. And I think once you then identify that, you could then decide from a sales enablement perspective, how am I going to put the energies into supporting, both that ROI and that particular initiative.
I love that. I love that, Beverly. So true. How about prioritization and as how it relates to sales leaders?
Yeah. Do you want me to take that one, Bev?
Sure.
Okay. I think at the super high level, prioritization is key, but it's got to be done with sales leadership so that everybody's aligned, right? I'll admit we probably all have rolled out some type of program or activity where we didn't necessarily have sales leadership engagement and approval or buy-in, and it doesn't work, right? So you've got to make sure that they're aligned with what you're rolling out and what they expect out of the program or the effort or the subject that's the topic, right? When it comes to rollout, I think also coaching and selling skills are critical. And when you start to look at the flywheel, maybe in some cases, things like project management skills may be required, which is a little bit different than what we're used to, right? Also, understanding how to reference sell, right? Understanding how to ask for referrals. It's also not just sales. Sales, obviously, we're all sales enablement, so sales is key. But the whole flywheel involves all customer-facing teams, okay? And they should be able to recognize when a customer is speaking of a challenge that your platform or solution can solve, right? If they spot it, then communicating that to the right team becomes part of the process. If communication is key, and you got a process around communication for that key information, then people are more likely to follow it. Okay, if you don't have a clear-cut, short, effective process, then if somebody like in customer success or customer service here's a challenge or an opportunity that they think might be relevant and they want to pass it over, if they don't know how to pass it over, it's not going to happen, right? So you got to make sure that those things are those communication channels are really clean and always open and effective. Okay. Think about also when addressing product rollouts, the impact and value to a client must be clearly identified. Again, I think we've all seen some things sometimes where people get caught up in the technology because they're the product owner, but they miss sometimes what's that key value to the customer, right? So and how is that explained to the customer or the prospect, and how is part of that message how it reduces risk for them, right? How does it future proof them, because they don't want to make a decision today that's going to affect them in the future, that's going to affect them negatively in the future, right? So this means your marketing and product teams also have to take that flywheel into effect when developing the messaging and the positioning of the products or services. It should revolve around meeting a customer's demands and challenges, not just cool products because somebody thought they were cool, right? So
100%, 100%.
Not that anybody would ever do that, but
What I'm hearing is there's a lot of planning that has to be done up front to make this run smoothly and get the adoption that we're looking for. And then once we have that framework in place, we can repeat it and tweak it for different initiatives, right? I love it.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's say worst case example, folks here. What prevents the flywheel from being successful?
Because we've never been in the worst case, right?
that doesn't happen for any of us, right? Sure. So what prevents the flywheel from being successful? That's a huge one, right? Because there's so many things that can affect the success of the flywheel, right? Let me hit some of the more operational ones, and then maybe Bev can jump in after that, right? So we talked about some of the things, selling skills, right? A hunter's selling skills are different than that of a farmer or a dedicated new business rep or an account manager. An account manager thinks more of the relationship driven from the start, and they'll approach a sale from the long-term effect, not just the short-term business perspective, okay? The other thing I've started to hear is in some cases, it can even start as early as the HR organization, right? Are there traits that they might be that are more relevant to somebody who understands the flywheel versus a hardcore new business hunter? Now, you obviously need both, but are there some traits that you can actually educate HR on to look for that helps build this flywheel effect, and you're hiring candidates who understand it more effectively, right? Again, you always need both. Then you got to look at things like, again, these are operational, but comp plans. Many companies have one AE or account executive that's responsible for new business as well as expansion. If the comp plans are messed up, then they're going to focus more on new business than they are on satisfying the customer, growing that customer, etc. So you've got to kind of look at that. And it's not just the account executive themselves, but their manager. Okay, you've got to look at this from because compensation drives behavior, and you've got to kind of take that into effect if you're developing a flywheel approach. Corporate vision. If the entire organization isn't lined up behind the flywheel, then the opportunity for success is going to lessen, right? Marketing's got to be invested in installed base marketing. How do they keep the installed base up to speed so you keep that flywheel going, right? Sales quotas and management quotas must support that installed base sale. Customer success has to be in lockstep with sales, and the process has to be in place so that they can pass leads. You can foster that communication, that cooperative approach, and not operate in silos. So those are some of the operational things that I think of. What about you, Bev?
So I want to just make a comment on a couple of things that you said. You talked about corporate vision, and I think it goes even beyond corporate vision. One of the points that comes to mind for me is more tied to, and I'm saying the culture of the company. You know, is that company more of a growth mindset or a change mindset? Because I think that, you know, if you're in a company where they're rigid or a person is rigid, if someone's a change enabler and of the mindset, you know, that we do things like this because we've always done things like that, that's always going to be the biggest inhibitor to the success of the flywheel. I think that, you know, if you want to take a flywheel model and apply it, I think that you have to be willing to change. And I think you also need to, I always say you need to embrace humility, right? Because what we're doing today might not be right, in 6 months. And you just need to be willing to, think about the fact that I'm willing to change. I'm willing to admit this isn't working. I'm willing to pivot.
Yep.
So that would be one thing. The other thing I just wanted to share with everybody is I think it's really important that you align yourself with the customer's journey, right? And we're starting to see a lot of data. We recently read some data from Forrester, and they were saying that it's taking, now that we're in a COVID world, it's taking buyers, there's 33% more interactions between the sales team and the buyer than in the past. And there's also 66% more what they call self-guided discovery that the buyer is doing. So that buyer is being proactive, and that buyer is going out, either talking to other customers, doing research on their own. So I think that, when we're thinking about this flywheel moving, and, to your point, Bob, thinking about the corporate vision, we can't just be thinking about what we do in sales. We have to think about it much more holistically, and what we can be doing just to make that customer journey, more effective. You talked a lot, you were more in the weeds on compensation, on things like that. I do think it's also a good time to sort of, put a stake in the ground and to say, is my sales organization set up the way it needs to in order to keep that flywheel moving? And I'm not saying that, you have to shake everything up, but it's worth saying, am I structured correctly? And you may come out of this exercise and you might say, I am structured correctly. But then I would say to take a deeper dive on what I think more of like the milestone points. So you've got these times where, for example, maybe your customer has purchased, the software, and now they're moving into implementation. Like that's a major milestone for the customer. Or maybe when, renewal comes and you need to make sure the renewal rep and the CSM is aligned. So I would just say, take a good step back and see that all of the customer data is moving forward with you, and that tribal knowledge is being shared. I don't know for many of you on the phone now, but to me, like when I have to call Comcast, my blood boils before I even make the call, right? Because I know 30 times I'm going to have to tell my story to 30 different people because nothing moves around, with my resolution. So that's, that's again, just make sure that data keeps moving so that flywheel is in motion. The other point I would make, and this would really, again, more of a broad point, is about adoption. To keep that flywheel moving, you need to make sure your customers just aren't purchasing the product, but they're using and executing that product. And to me, the most successful way to do that is you have to have a clear understanding of, what is the outcome they're trying to achieve, and what are the steps that we as a organization are putting in place to help them through that to get to that final outcome, right? And what's the mutual plan so that we're accountable to it from a timeline perspective, from a roles and responsibilities, both across the internal organization and with our customer. And then, are we as a company, are we sharing the use cases? So if we've had success in one area of the company, is that being communicated across? And then lastly, I think it's always good to show love. So, is it worthwhile to have, on your most strategic accounts, to have an executive sponsor, just sharing their love? And then I think, just this is more of a byproduct of adoption. But I do think that, you know, you should look at your internal processes, and you should think about, you know, are you building a community across your customers? Because, you know, they all have the same relevant problems. They're all trying to do the same thing. And so can they leverage their tribal knowledge so that we're getting more stickiness? And I think you know, to me, an example of that is I go to a boot camp probably, you know, 3 or 4 days a week. And, you know, every single time I go, they kick my butt. And I think about leaving because I think to myself, my body's sore. It's been 6 years that I've been there. You know, I'm 6 years older. But when my alarm goes off, I think of my community. I think of my people, and, you know, I hit the alarm and I get my butt out of bed. So I think it's really important to build that community across your customers.
Absolutely. That is so powerful, Beverly. And I sympathize with you. I just recently joined CrossFit. I'm not sure why, and I am the I've ever been. But as far as communities go, I'm a member of a few myself, of different sales technology that we use. The customer communities are fantastic. I can talk to other users, I can learn from them, and I can hear what's coming up with the product as well. And you're right, it's so powerful.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit to that, because I love the Forrester comment, Bev, and the fact that now buyers or customers have increased their touch points, you know, by 33%. And that's key when you start to look at the whole flywheel thing, right? It's like that says that marketing has to be providing better content and more content and easily accessible content. Means sales has to reach out more often and provide value in those conversations, not just touching base, right? It's like, no, I don't want to touch base with anybody, but I'll talk to you if you're going to provide me some level of value. So that goes back to the whole what's going on in the market, what's going on in the industry, and the community, or the customer forums, right? Those are touch points.
Yeah.
So the more the more you can encourage those, then those become the sources for your customers and prospects to get that information. And to again, they're gonna have touch points. So you might as well try to encourage them as much as possible. So I just always, I like that stat, and I like tying it into some of the things that you were saying.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. I've learned so much from you folks today. I think it may be some time for some questions. I think we've got some that have come up in the Q&A. Let's see what we've got here. All right, we have a question. I'll throw it out to the floor and you can jump on. What would be the best strategy to implement data-driven approach for training and coaching on a flywheel? It's relatively easy to implement on a funnel pipeline where we can see precisely where our reps are lacking.
I guess are we allowed to ask a question back? So I guess, do you feel it's easier on a funnel than on a flywheel? Because I sort of think the flywheel, because you know, you've got everybody throughout the organization sort of aligned on what needs to take place. I've seen in my experience that once that flywheel is moving, it's helped, you know, it's easy to measure. And what I would do is I would sort of say a couple things on the measurement piece. I would try to look at some of your, you know, like what is it you're trying to accomplish, right? And then sort of back it out on how can you measure that. So if you're trying to maybe build new customers, you know, maybe the way to measure that is to identify, you know, prospecting activities that your reps are doing, and when that new lead comes through, you know, just you know, how are we uncovering their problem, and how are we, you know, what are we showing them during the demo, how are we handling their objections? So as you're going through stage, you're sort of monitoring, is this customer converting? Is this new customer converting? And if they're not, why are we running into problems?
So there's also a couple of other things that jump to my mind as well, Bev, is things like you can measure things like recurring annual revenue, right? How much are you getting out of your customer base? Okay. And that's something that a lot of companies in the SaaS world measure today, right? And it's like they're looking to get, I don't know, 5, 7, 10% more out of those customers. So that's one kind of crisp measurement that people use. The other one might be when you're looking at inbound leads that turn into opportunities. What percentage of them are coming out of your installed base versus your new business base, and can you set goals to kind of increase that marketing spend into your installed base, and you can then see the results of those turning into opportunities to close one business. Those are some other things that they might be relevant to you and to the company, right? And different ways to kind of measure it, and see the effect and set goals against it.
Yeah, absolutely. We do the same. We'll set the goals, figure out what we need to achieve them, and work backwards. And we'll do the coaching based on that. And it's a very agile, iterative approach, right? There's always something to support and help. Yeah.
Yep.
All
I was going to say, you can also do it with like new products and things like that too, right? If you're working with the other teams, maybe you can identify the best target persona or the best target client, and then start to target your activities to those clients and prospects, to again measure the success of those products that help them leverage what they already bought, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right. We've got another question in the chat. This one is from Corinne. Can you share those stats from Forrester again, Beverly, regarding the
Sure.
productivity?
Yeah, so what it's saying now is that it's taking 33% more touch points to close a deal. And so that's, since COVID. So, I mean, part of that, right, is we know there are more cooks in the kitchen, right? And when you're looking just at how many buyers are in the decision-making process, that number has increased significantly. But I also think there's probably a lot more, scrutiny that's taking place during this time frame. And then the other number is that there are now 66% increase in what they refer to as a self-guided discovery. And when they say self-guided discovery, think about it more from the perspective that, the prospect on their own is doing their homework. So they've increased the amount of research that they're doing prior, prior to speaking with you, but then as they're speaking with you, they're continuing to still, do their research beyond the scope of your conversation.
Yep. And that's where things like the forums and the community, and again, those are all considered touch points, self-guided touch points.
Absolutely. I do that myself for everything that I purchase, right? I think it's just a product of where we are today. We've got one more question from Reg. I love all these questions. Thank you, folks. Say a company is setting up their sales enablement for the first time. How do they create that with the flywheel in mind, or structure it around that flywheel model?
Okay.
Can you pull up the first slide, the flywheel slide?
Sure can.
So I would say again, as you're looking at the flywheel, right? What can we be doing in sales to, increase activity, and what can we be doing in sales to decrease any internal friction? And I think, to even be more successful, it's not just sales, right? I guess in sales enablement, if your focus is truly sales enablement versus, revenue enablement, then yes, just focus in on the sales team. But if your focus is more broad, I would ask that question in each of my different groups that are customer facing to see how I can just make the process more effective.
Yeah. The other thing I might add to that, right? If I were going into a new company or a new role, I'd first I would first understand what their current approach is, and chances are it's going to be the funnel approach. But then because again, your sales enablement, having those discussions with the sales leadership about the benefits of a flywheel approach versus a funnel approach, and the data that supports it, that those are some of the conversations or some of the background that I would do. And you like Bev said, you've got to make sure that sales is aligned to what you're trying to do, and then the company, if it's broader, which it should be if you're trying to do the funnel. But you got to understand what they have currently, and then speak to the benefits of going for a flywheel approach.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of that executive sponsorship, right? Having leadership on board. So very important. Okay. Wow. What a session. Before we close, Beverly and Bob, I'm going to throw it out to you. What is the main thing that you want our audience to take away from this event? Let's start with you, Beverly.
I would say my main takeaway would be that, each of us are in an environment where things are constantly changing. And so I think it's really important that we identify, what is the outcome we're hoping to get? How are we going to measure that outcome today? And then, Melissa, a little bit through your point with, that executive sponsorship, if we need to change direction, let's make sure we have that executive sponsor and everyone, behind the new direction. And what is the metric that we're going to track and the, outcome that we want from it.
I love that. Bob.
Melissa said one, and you took two, and you took mine. No, I think executive alignment is key, right? And then the ability to communicate that continuously across the company, if that's what you're going to be doing, right? It's not, hey, we're going to take this flywheel approach and you roll it out and everybody, jumps up and down and it's cool for the first week. You've got to continue to reinforce it with the measurements, the successes, etc., at the leadership level. So whether that's on a monthly at monthly meetings, somehow or other, you've got to continue to reinforce it, because people will have the tendency to go back to what they're familiar with and what they know. So executive buy-in, then continued executive reinforcement and measurement and success and communication on it is what I'd say.
I think that was three. Bob.
I think it was.
you had to up me there, huh?
Actually, I'm going to share one too. I'm going to share my takeaway from these very smart people. So this flywheel, it feels like it's continuous, it's evolving. We're always tweaking it and making it better. So my takeaway is perfection is the barrier to progress. We can always do better, right? I'm going to leave you with that. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to wrap things up. But first, we want to thank everyone for attending. We absolutely love having you join us. And thank you to our wonderful Brainshark. They're doing great things, and be sure to check them out. Also, thank you to Beverly and Bob. It's been a pleasure working with you. This has been great content. And the recordings and key takeaways will be available on our site shortly. And don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'd love to have you back. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.